of different ways of looking at life within landscape. The dominant botanical illustration in this work is the bunya pine by Gillian Scott, Araucaria bidwilli. The Araucaria group of plants were dominant plants in the late Cretaceous period. Here we also have a series of other maps that are integrated into this work. We can see up the top an image from Cunningham's Gap. Through here, again, I'm referencing the idea of life as solid shapes, as these objects, and life flowing through space and time. Here we can see a map of Australia drifting north and the changes in vegetation as that occurred. And here we can see the currents actually opening up between Australia as it drifted north and Antarctica, and of course Australia dried out and Antarctica slowly became cooler. Here's pollen from Nothophagus, that's Antarctic beech, and we can see other details as well of Antarctic beech forests and other plants, scanned plants and illustrations of plants from the Boyce Gardens. There is another map flowing through this work. You can see the arrows of it. Up close you could see it in more detail, and that again is a map that references the proliferation of flowering plants across Gondwana, from the Rift Valley between South America and Africa, and then across Antarctica and into Australia.
These two paintings are of the hoop pine here and the bunya pine there. They are members of the Araucariaceae, which was the dominant family of conifers in Gondwana land. Hoop pine is indigenous to right down the Great Dividing Range on the east coast. The bunya pine is endemic to Australia and to the Bunya Mountains of South Queensland. But this one is present in many different parts right down the Great Dividing Range. Here's a little drawing of it. It's a very untidy tree. Whereas if you ever see a tall tree with a beautifully rounded dome top, that will be a bunya pine. The hoop pine has small cones made up of seeds with papery wings. These are the unripe cones on the tree, and these are the male cones down here. That particular painting took me a very long time to draw, because you have to get all the overlapping arrangement of all the scales. You have to get that right. This picture of the bunya pine shows a long stem of vegetative growth, and the size of the leaves varies with the season. So you have winter, summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter. This is a piece with the male cones on it, and in the background is a pencil drawing of the enormous cones that this tree bears. Here we have one of the cones, female cones, off the bunya pine tree in the Boyce Gardens. As you could see, it's very large and very heavy. It will fall to pieces if it's dropped like this, and when it dries out a bit, it will split into its separate parts.
The dinosaurs lived through a bracket of time that we call the Mesozoic. The Mesozoic is divided into three periods of time called the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. The orange orb that is at the center of this work features maps, overlaid maps from these different periods of time. And in this we can actually see the breakup of Pangaea, and following that, the breakup or early breakup of Gondwana. On the far middle left of this work, I have overlapped a series of other maps from David Johnson's book called The Geology of Australia, that deals specifically with Australia's separation from Antarctica, which is an ongoing theme in my work. There is another orb in the far right-hand corner, which takes us back much further into deep time, beyond 4.6 billion years ago, to a stage in accretion where the Earth had collided with a planet called Theia, and that had resulted in the formation of the Moon. So in a poetic way, this is referencing a much earlier point in deep time where we can see the Earth and the Moon as molten orbs. Running across this work, we can see a blue line fading into the far distance. This is called the Tasman line. The Tasman line divides much earlier formation of Australia, early rocks, dating back in some cases to billions of years ago, and they're in the western side of Australia, to the eastern seaboard, which is a much younger series of events that caused the eastern seaboard to come into creation. And we can see some of those activities in the Carboniferous period, again referencing David Johnson's book, The Geology of Australia, and that map is in the far left corner. And we can see Sydney, we can see Wollongong, we can see Newcastle, we can see Brisbane, and we see the volcanism from the late Cretaceous. In the bottom right-hand corner, I have taken one of my favourite animals that lived not that long ago, a giant goanna, and we can see the fossilised remains of this giant Australian goanna, which I imagine would have at one time existed in this area. There's also drawings sourced from Gillian Scott of the Araucaria